AOC's fans like to say she's living in our heads like Pharrell Williams singing Happy. But in fact, it's the policies that live in our heads, and they should live there, because we know so many people who've been brutalized by such ideas. When you hear someone talk about socialism like it's a fun new way to pay down my college debt, you gotta scream. Just prepare to be called awful things for doing so. Today, pointing out the evil of the past makes you the bane of the present.
I do think she's very talented on social media and she's got a big following, but she's now a member of Congress as a Democrat, and there's certain rules as a Democrat that you have to play by. Now, she's just a freshman. She has to realize Pinocchios are for Donald Trump. She can't be so sloppy. She's getting fact-checked all the time by the Washington.
All right, let me break this down for you. The Democratic Party, in its boundless collective wisdom, is apparently floating Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez as a serious presidential contender for 2028. I mean, genuinely, look. American politics these days feels like a reality series greenlit by a streaming platform on an energy drink overdose, but even by those standards, this takes things to a whole new level of unhinged. And before the AOC fan brigade charges into the comments section armed with hashtags and self-righteous energy, just hear me out, because if AOC truly represents the Democratic Party's future, we might as well gift-wrap the 2028 election for the Republicans and throw in a side dish. Let's begin with the obvious. AOC isn't some freshly minted revolutionary. She isn't arriving at the table with groundbreaking new ideas. She's not a contemporary political visionary. She's not even a committed Bernie Sanders loyalist at heart. What she is repackaged socialism dressed up in a social media-friendly wrapper. You know the trick: dust off a decades-old VHS tape, slap a glossy new label on it, and try selling it as Ultra HD. That's the entire foundation of AOC's political identity.
AOC was on 60 Minutes last night, quite a feat for a newcomer. Must be all her great new ideas.
People are going to have to start paying their fair share in taxes. Once you get to like the tippy tops, on your $10 millionth dollar, sometimes you see tax rates as high as 60 or 70%.
What an expression. Now, the real story isn't AOC's very old ideas. It's the media's gushy view of her. Even with her old ideas, she gets on 60 Minutes. The past is called the future, and you better love it.
It's not the future of anything. It's more like Blockbuster pretending to be a streaming service. She isn't offering anything original. She's peddling a comeback tour of ideas that already ran their course. It's the political equivalent of rebooting a notorious box office disaster and expecting awards season glory. Spoiler, it flopped the first time, and the second run won't be any different. But here's where things escalate to another level entirely. The media, bless their hearts, have essentially transformed into her unofficial publicity machine. A considerable chunk of legacy news outlets cover AOC like she's the political equivalent of a landmark tech launch. Sleek, revolutionary, loaded with next-generation features, but in reality, the whole thing feels closer to a flip phone with a designer case. Nostalgic, perhaps even endearing, but hardly cutting edge. Just look at the coverage. She sits down for a television interview and suddenly she's speaking for an entire generation. She fires off one emotionally charged tweet and now she's shattering ceilings. She dances in an old college clip and somehow she's triumphing over her critics. Come on, that wasn't a genuine controversy. The only people amplifying the outrage were a handful of outlets pushing a story against an audience that didn't actually exist. Most people on the right couldn't have cared less about that video. But sure, let's frame her as a fearless cultural trailblazer just for dancing. And that's exactly where Greg Gutfeld leaned all the way in.
AOC's delightful dancing video from last week. The media created a fake story that conservatives attacked her over this delightful trifle. Not really. In fact, the only stories written about the dance were by liberals using it to falsely smear the right. So the press creates a shield around her in which any criticism must be due to sexism or bigotry, when in fact it's in their heads and not.
Now, love him or not, one thing about Greg Gutfeld is undeniable: he pulls no punches. His take on AOC went beyond standard political commentary. It read more like a thorough deconstruction. He cut past the manufactured hype and delivered his central argument plainly: AOC isn't ready for the main stage. You could make the case she isn't even ready for the level right below it yet. Here's the core issue: going viral is not the same thing as being genuinely viable. AOC might own Twitter threads, Instagram stories, and TikTok clips, but real leadership operates on an entirely different playing field. There is a massive gulf between commanding social media attention and actually governing a country. She comes across as energetic and passionate, absolutely like someone fresh out of college, brimming with ideas and grand ambitions. But when it comes to steering a nation of more than 330 million people, that demands a completely different tier of responsibility. And that's not something you improvise your way through.
AOC. What? She's kind of fun in a silly but earnest, wrong but adorable way. She's like your daughter when she comes back from her first year at Brown, full of half-baked, half opinions, in need of some gentle, patient deprogramming. But people have to realize new faces doesn't mean new ideas. Drives me crazy. AOC has never introduced a fresh idea or issue in her.
And don't even get me started on the policy front, because once you strip away the filters and the hashtags, what are you actually left with? A collection of ideas that critics say have been circulating for decades, now being packaged as something daring and new, things like steeper taxes on high earners, a federally guaranteed healthcare system for all, and sweeping climate proposals like the Green New Deal. Supporters argue these plans are designed to confront inequality and climate change through large-scale structural reform and investment in clean energy and employment. But critics see it through a very different lens. To them, it feels like warmed-over policy dressed up in fresh branding. They contend some of these proposals sound more aspirational than actionable, raising serious questions about cost, feasibility, and lasting consequences. That's the real fault line here. On one side, it's a transformative, far-reaching agenda. On the other, it's seen as recycled thinking wearing modern packaging. And depending on where you stand politically, it either looks like a bold path forward or something we've already traveled down before.
Strategy works by preventing real criticism about her actual beliefs, which are retreads of horrible ideas from previous centuries. Socialism with a smile, fascism among friends, Venezuela meets Vegas.
Here's a tension that comes up consistently in conversations about AOC. When someone challenges her ideas, the reaction can be immediate and intense. Disagreement gets read as something personal or ideological rather than substantive, which makes open, honest debate feel almost impossible. Question her figures or push back on her policy proposals, and the response often pivots from the actual ideas to arguments about the critic's motives or delivery. The challenge then becomes keeping the conversation anchored to the issues themselves, rather than letting it drift into debates about character or intent, so that policy discussions can stay productive and rooted in actual evidence.
What if a woman had challenged her to a debate? So she's actually being racist.
I think Candace Owens did.
Oh, really?
Now
There you go.
She has, like,
because
doubled the money.
So what? To answer your other question, she had to cloak her weak ideas in the armor of a smear, because she's learned as a leftist the best thing you can do is smear somebody if you don't have an argument, and the smears actually work. Nobody wants to be called racist or racist.
And look, we're simply asking the same questions we'd ask any public figure championing sweeping reforms and trillion-dollar proposals. But somehow those very questions start to feel like forbidden territory. At that point, it no longer resembles debate, it starts to look like evasion. Less about policy substance, more about political theater. The media coverage can feel so defensive of her that challenging anything triggers an almost instant backlash. Offer a dissenting view and you're dismissed faster than a streaming show with weak ratings. It stops resembling journalism and starts resembling narrative management. Critics get silenced while supporters treat every development like a landmark moment. And honestly, let's spend a moment on the fan base itself, because sometimes the most intense element of all this isn't even AOC. It's the atmosphere surrounding her. Some supporters treat her every post like a profound pronouncement, no scrutiny allowed. You could recycle a speech from 50 years ago, put her name on it, and some people would applaud like they're witnessing something entirely new.
AOC's fans like to say she's living in our heads like Pharrell Williams singing Happy. But in fact, it's the policies that live in our heads, because we know so many people who've been brutalized by such ideas. When you hear someone talk about socialism like it's a fun new way to pay down my college debt, you gotta scream. Just prepare to be called awful things for doing so. Today, pointing out the evil of the past makes you the bane of...
No questions tolerated. The moment you attempt to push back on her ideas or highlight inconsistencies, it can feel like you've been shut down instantly. Ask for a genuine exchange and suddenly the conversation pivots to labeling rather than engaging with the actual argument. At that point, it stops being dialogue and starts resembling devotion, less about testing ideas, more about defending a position at all costs. And when commentators like Ben Shapiro or Candace Owens have publicly proposed debates, critics note those invitations rarely seem to lead anywhere. To many observers, those feel like missed chances for real, open discourse. Because ultimately, if ideas cannot withstand genuine back-and-forth scrutiny, people are going to naturally start questioning just how solid those ideas actually are. Passion matters, no one's disputing that. But passion unaccompanied by hard facts and concrete answers isn't leadership. It's just volume without direction.
Game the system, they changed it.
And who do you see on the horizon for 2028 in the Democratic primary?
Right now?
Yeah.
Bernie and AOC.
No.
They got the biggest crowds.
That doesn't matter.
It won't sustain itself, but right now they have no leader. Okay? But this is the thing the Republican Party has to understand too. Both parties lost in the last election. Trump won, okay? And I don't know if that's going to transfer. We should have won 4 more seats in the Senate. If you looked at the last 70 races for the Senate, 69 follow exactly the way.
I think it's Moore versus Youngkin. That's where I see it.
Youngkin would be.
Youngkin
it's going to go back to
adjacent, and then Vance and Jr. will fight it out for that crowd.
But AOC and Bernie, and who's at the top of the ticket?
They're going to lead right now.
Who's at the top of that ticket, Kevin? Because if it's not Bernie, he's going to be vice president and then wait his turn.
No. Even Bill Maher has weighed in, suggesting AOC could prove to be an even larger political miscalculation than Kamala Harris. And let's be candid, clearing that particular bar requires a notable effort. If AOC were to secure the nomination, it wouldn't just be a defeat. It would be political self-destruction. Whatever you may think of Kamala, she at least projected a sense of understanding what the job actually entailed. AOC, by contrast, comes across more like a digital activist who put on a congresswoman's outfit for the occasion. Here's a legitimate question worth sitting with. When exactly did performative outrage and social media reach become the benchmarks for leading a global superpower? We used to evaluate presidential candidates on leadership, experience, and a verifiable record of accomplishment. Now it seems like a strong engagement rate on Instagram is being floated as a credential for handling national security decisions. And this isn't uniquely about AOC, it reflects a much broader pattern in modern politics. Performance over policy. Optics over genuine vision. Identity box checking over proven competence. The left in particular appears increasingly focused on appearances and ideological signaling rather than the unglamorous, difficult work of actually governing. Here's a message for the Democratic Party: stop selecting nominees based on popularity metrics or demographic representation scorecards. Start choosing leaders who can genuinely lead.
Her ideas are straight out of the socialist playbook. I do think she's very talented on social media and she's got a big following, but she's now a member of Congress as a Democrat, and there's certain rules as a Democrat that you have to play by. Now, she's just a freshman. She has to realize Pinocchios are for Donald Trump. She can't be so sloppy. She's getting fact-checked all the time by the Washington.
The loudest voice in the room is rarely the most informed one. Now, I'm aware some of you are thinking, but she draws enormous crowds, she's got real momentum. Sure, that sounds compelling right up until you remember Kamala Harris had all of that too. Massive rallies, wall-to-wall media coverage, a campaign war chest that dwarfed the competition, and every progressive talking point imaginable. And we all know how that story ended. All spectacle, minimal substance. Let's not confuse digital influence for real-world electoral viability. Twitter engagement doesn't win elections. Viral clips don't turn into legislation. Instagram followers can't balance a federal budget. Enthusiasm, on its own, is not a governing strategy. Right now, AOC's entire platform reads like a last-minute term paper written the night before it was due, graded on an extremely forgiving curve.
People love AOC. People love Jasmine Crockett. People love Eric Swalwell and the like. And I think that the Democratic Party should put the people out there who the people want. They should put the politicians out there who the people want, who they're asking for, who are meeting the moment with the same energy that
They're not asking for AOC.
Yes, they are.
The people you party with are.
No. The people I party with don't like AOC.
Oh, please.
No, they don't at all.
Well, most people don't.
But
she's
AOC
very...
Look, nobody is disputing that she's sharp or media fluent. AOC has charisma, stage presence, and a genuine gift for turning a handful of characters into a cultural flashpoint. But none of that qualifies someone to lead the most powerful country on earth. We need seasoned adults in the room, people who understand how government machinery actually functions, not just how algorithms reward content. If Democrats are genuinely convinced AOC is their 2028 answer, they might want to get a head start on composing their concession remarks. And while we're at it, let's put to rest the reflexive notion that every critique of her constitutes a personal attack. That kind of deflection is strangling honest political conversation. If your ideas can't survive scrutiny without retreating behind identity politics, perhaps they weren't as solid as advertised. Bottom line, AOC may reign over the social media public square, but that doesn't make her qualified for the Oval Office. Her ideas feel derivative, her factual record is questionable, and her pattern of avoiding direct debate speaks volumes. Leadership isn't about being celebrated, it's about being accountable. If 2028 is shaping up to be AOC's moment, Democrats could be headed for a reckoning that makes 2016 look like a minor setback. So let's state it plainly, the emperor has no clothes. Just a very sophisticated Instagram filter. Thanks for watching. If you found this worthwhile, go ahead and hit that like button, subscribe, and drop your thoughts in the comments below. I want to know, is AOC genuinely the future of the Democratic Party, or just a loud detour into wishful thinking? Let's get that conversation started.